I hope you're having an amazing weekend so far, wherever you are in the world. And thank you so much for joining me for another one of these episodes, which I create to help you move forward faster in your art journey. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about what I like referring to as the Goldilocks Zone. I'm going to be explaining what it is and how it relates to your artistic journey, why it is important that you understand this concept, and as always, I'm also going to be sharing 5 practical tips that are going to help you make sure that you're staying within this Goldilocks zone as you move forward with your artistic practice. By understanding this concept and making sure that you're staying within this Goldilocks zone, you're going to avoid frustration, you're going to avoid burnout. And this is important because both of these things lead you to stop creating art altogether, to give up, or they also lead you to stop creating art for a long period of time, to the point that when you come back, you have to start from scratch all over again. And even though I'm a huge believer in continuing to challenge yourself and setting goals, because this is what's going to allow us to grow and evolve as artists, it is also immensely important that you enjoy your journey. It's a balance, and there's a very fine line between pushing yourself just enough and pushing yourself a little bit too far to the point that you get frustrated and overwhelmed and burned out. And by explaining this concept to you and giving you the tips that I'll be providing, hopefully it's going to make it easier for you to tell if that specific art project that you're wanting to take on right now is appropriate for this current time in your journey. And so this is a concept that I've been bringing up with students lately quite a bit, and I really feel that it's helped them stay focused on what they should be focusing on in this current point in time in their journey. And simultaneously, because they have seen themselves successfully reach these milestones, they have been more motivated to continue on their path. So just as a refresher, Goldilocks and the Three Bears is a folktale where there is a family of 3 bears living in some sort of cottage in the woods, and Mama Bear, Papa Bear, and Baby Bear were about to sit down to enjoy a bowl of porridge, but it's a little bit too warm, so they decide to go out for a walk or something and come back and eat it later. And so while they're out and their home is left alone, this little girl called Goldilocks comes in. She comes across the 3 bowls of porridge that were left on the table. She tries the porridge in one of the bowls and it's way too hot. Then she tries the next porridge and it's way too cold. And then she tries the final porridge and it's just right. After enjoying the porridge from that 3rd bowl, Goldilocks later walks into the home a little bit more, finds 3 chairs, and then she sits on one chair and it's way too hard for her. She sits on the second chair and it's way too soft for her. And I think she actually breaks that second chair. And then she sits on the 3rd chair and it's just right for her size and the right level of softness. She explores the house a little bit more, finds the bear's room, and finds 3 beds. She tries to lay down on the first bed, but it's way too big or high for her. She tries to lay down in the second bed and it's way too small or low for her. And then she tries the 3rd bed and it's just the right size for her. And the bears arrive home while she's sleeping. They find that someone has been inside of their home. They find the empty bowl of porridge. They find the broken chair, etc. And then they come into their room and they find Goldilocks asleep in one of the beds. And I think the folktale ends with Goldilocks waking up, noticing that she's not alone, and just running off into the woods. And just as an FYI, the term Goldilocks Zone has also been used since 1953 to refer to this area around the sun where the Earth is orbiting, which is not too hot and not too cold, so that water can still remain liquid. What is right for you? What is too much and what is too little for you? What is just right for you right now? And it will change over time as you continue growing as an artist and developing your skills. But you have to be super honest and know yourself enough so that you're able to find that range that's just right for you. On one hand, you could be pushing yourself way too hard with way too much, whether it's because you're trying to take on compositions or subjects that involve techniques or just general knowledge that you're not aware of in this current point in time. Or you're simply trying to do way too much in a short period of time, and it's just too much with everything that you have going on in your life. But on the other hand, you could also be staying too much within your comfort zone because you're afraid to push yourself a little bit past your comfort zone. And this is also an issue because if you just stay within this comfy comfort zone, just taking on the art projects that are easy or come naturally to you, well, you're not going to be able to achieve that growth that you're probably looking for. So it's somewhere in between that you want to be. It's somewhere in between where you're going to be able to push yourself enough to see that growth, but not too much that you're still enjoying your journey. And yes, of course, it happens to all of us. At some point, we push ourselves a little bit too hard. And in other points, we might find that we are resting and being a little bit too comfy for too long in this comfort zone of ours. But the majority of the time, you should be within that Goldilocks zone. And what's cool is that now that you know what this is, if you find yourself being on either end a little bit too much or for too long, you can take note of what you discover about yourself, what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and bring yourself back into this Goldilocks zone. I often see beginners want to take on very, very complex, challenging subjects or compositions right in the beginning, and it's understandable because they don't know what they don't know. They're not aware of all of these different techniques that come into play, the knowledge of the subject on hand, whether it's a portrait, whether it's a landscape, whether it's a still life arrangement, or even an abstract piece. They don't know about art fundamentals involved, about composition, about color, all of these things. They're not aware of how that very complex composition can be broken down into all of these different things that can be studied in isolation in a much less overwhelming way, so that you're able to later on take on that full piece a lot more successfully and with greater ease and confidence. So they want to take on this full piece without even having covered the basics of art and without having any mastery over their medium yet. And they're not aware of all of these things that are involved. Because of this, unfortunately, it's super common that they get frustrated and demotivated when the results don't turn out as they expected them to, or because the process simply wasn't enjoyable for them because they were struggling too much along the way. And unfortunately for a lot of people, because they're trying to do these things that are way beyond their current level, or they're even taking classes or workshops or whatever it is, books even, that are meant for people who are further ahead, they then end up thinking that art is not for them, that they don't have the skills or the inherent abilities that an artist needs to have or something like that. And they give up when that is not the case at all. It's just you need to cover the basics and you need to take your learning journey towards more challenging things a step at a time and make sure that you're breaking things down in a way that makes sense for you and your current level, and use your critical thinking skills as you're selecting all of these resources that you're going to be using to advance your knowledge and your skills. Your artistic practice should feel right for you. It should push you a little bit, but it should also not be overwhelming to the point that you want to give up. So how do I personally know if the project on hand that I want to work on is right for me? I like listening to myself and observing how I am feeling. How does my body feel? What thoughts come up when I think of that project that I want to do? Usually I feel a little bit nervous, but excited at the same time. And after using my critical thinking skills and breaking what I'm seeing down into parts, and asking myself if I have experience with those different parts, it leads me to thinking that it's doable for me with my current skill levels and knowledge. Maybe not on the first try or even the second try, but by the third try, I should be able to do it with my current skill level and knowledge. Now that we've covered what the Goldilocks zone is, how it relates to your art journey, and why it's so important, I'm going to go ahead and provide 5 tips for you so that you can make sure that at least the majority of the time that you are dedicating to your art practice, you're staying within this zone. Tip number 1 is something that I kind of already mentioned before, and this is that you always want to be honest with yourself about where you're currently at. Set your ego aside because that's not going to be helpful at all, and acknowledge that creating great art is challenging and it takes practice. I know that a lot of us grow up thinking that art should be easy or fun. And yes, some people do create art just for fun to release stress or whatever the case may be. And you should definitely make time for that kind of artwork as you move forward in your journey, as I will be explaining in another point. But if you are really looking to develop your artistic skills and you're really looking to become a great artist with your medium and your subject, it's important to respect that learning journey. I think that by understanding that creating great art is challenging and getting to that point requires time and patience and dedication, it's a lot more likely that you're going to stick with it because you don't expect the most perfect masterpiece right off the bat. You know that it's a process. You're more likely to give yourself more time to get there. Moving into tip number 2, and this one is to make time to cover the basics. The basics on art fundamentals and the basics on your drawing or painting mediums of choice, and also the basics on your subjects of choice. This is important and something that a lot of beginners skip over because they see it as unnecessary, as tedious or boring. But you're going to hit a wall with what you're able to do. You're going to make the learning process way harder for yourself and more frustrating for yourself. And it's also going to make it so that you spend way longer trying to develop your artistic style and voice. So what do I mean with understanding the basics? So if you're trying to learn watercolor, make sure that you understand the medium. What makes that medium different from other painting mediums? Make sure that you develop your water control, that you understand basic washes, brush strokes. Take time to practice drills so that you can gain mastery over your medium and develop that water control before trying to jump into creating a full composition. That goes for the basics on understanding your medium, but also understand the basics of your subject. If you're trying to get better at painting landscapes or drawing landscapes, this applies for painting or drawing in whatever medium. But if you're trying to get better at painting landscapes, research different kinds of trees. Try painting different kinds of skies and clouds. Discover your own recipes for creating interesting and believable greens. If you like drawing or painting portraits, make sure that you're devoting time to understanding the structure of the head, facial proportions, anatomical aspects of different facial features. And finally, understand art fundamentals, because art fundamentals are going to help you create great compositions that are effective, that are visually pleasing, that are balanced, that are harmonious, that are able to transmit the message that you're looking to transmit. If you have that solid foundation to jump off from, it's going to be way easier for you to move on and successfully tackle larger complete compositions. Moving on to tip number 3, and this one is, when you're thinking of creating a new piece and maybe you have your reference photo already that you're thinking of working with, or you're thinking of drawing or painting something from life, or even if you're trying to draw or paint something from imagination, ask yourself, have I ever worked on something similar to this before? Or do I have experience with the techniques that this piece would involve, or with the different elements involved in this piece? Do I have experience with those things? And if I have created artwork with that before, was that easy or was that hard for me? If your answer is no, I don't have experience with this kind of piece, no, I have never tried to draw or paint any of these things with this medium before, or yes, I've tried to do this in the past, but it was way too much for me, I just couldn't do it, then it might be worth trying to do something that's a little bit simpler, or again, breaking down that complex composition into things that you can practice in isolation. Moving on to tip number 4, and this one kind of piggybacks off the last one. This one is, when in doubt, break it down. So if you're not quite sure that that piece that you're going to try to create is right for you, break it down into separate layers, separate techniques, separate elements that you can practice in isolation. And once you start that practice with smaller studies in your sketchbook or smaller isolated watercolor paintings or whatever the case may be, if you feel it's easy for you, then jump straight into the piece. If you feel it's hard for you, then spend more time on those isolated studies or explorations. Jumping straight into tip number 5, and this one is, if you find yourself constantly struggling with burnout or frustration, you're not enjoying your journey, or you're not seeing any growth, change your goals. Change the way that you're currently doing things. I think the quote was attributed to Albert Einstein, who said, if you're doing the same things over and over again and you expect different results, that's the definition of insanity. Many times we don't know how to properly set goals and we overwhelm ourselves. And learning how to set the right goals is definitely a process and something that we have to continue reevaluating over time, depending on how our current goal setting method and time management and everything like that is going for us. It's something that we continue improving over time. It's never 100% perfect. But what I can say for sure is that if you're constantly struggling and if you're not seeing any growth, it's probably time to change your goals, to change how you're doing things. All right, and just to finish this one up, I want to share one last bonus tip with you, which is very important in order for you to be able to enjoy your journey. And this one is to always make time in your art practice for enjoyable pieces, for pieces that maybe are unplanned, they are intuitive, they are explorational, they are play. Not everything has to be serious, and I want to encourage you to not make your journey super serious. Yes, you're trying to improve, and yes, you're trying to challenge yourself a bit along the way, but I don't like taking art making or the artist journey too seriously to the point that it becomes too academic or tedious. Personally, I like to see things as simple. I like to bring things down to earth. I don't like being too rigid or too academic or anything like that. And when I'm able, I'm looking to bring in humor and enjoyment into what I am doing. And in my opinion, it's very important that you're not always pushing, and challenging yourself in every single way with every single piece that you work on. You want to always make time for those pieces that come more easily to you, that are more natural to you, that you have fun with, maybe even pieces that you don't have to plan for, that are more intuitive. This way you can ensure that a certain percentage of your art practice time is 100% enjoyable, and it kind of balances out with the other pieces that require more time, more energy, more focus, and more dedication. Thank you so much for watching. Talk to you soon and take good care. Bye.